Okay, till it gets completed. Update the titles. 64. There it goes. Live. Take it away. Sorted. Sorted. Go live. Live on YouTube, live on LinkedIn. Share on. Getting live. Perfecto. Live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube. Good morning, Mr. Tarun. Good morning. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's already 8:07 and we've got a lot to cover. Take your front seats, rise and shine, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me properly. I hope my audio is not a problem. I've sent it to people on WhatsApp, thousands of people, and I'm live on LinkedIn. I am live on YouTube. I'll check my audio. Yeah, my audio is good on LinkedIn. So let's begin. Let's have the show that we deserve, right? Rise and shine. Beautiful day ahead. Let's begin the show that we deserve. My only concern is that I'm very awkward with my hair. So that is a bit of a problem, but yeah, should be okay. Bum bum bum. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Audio is fine on LinkedIn. Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! Oh, but before we go, you gotta follow a tradition, right? We need the tradition. The sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does. It does that every day. Every day we get a little luckier because of the simultaneous sip. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug or glass or tank, a chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. Today I'm having hot water with some black pepper in it. It's actually very good for me. And here we go. Beautiful. Sublime. Let's take it again. Lovely. Lovely. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you're not alone. It says that we're in this together. And that's such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin with a good news first. Good news because it is a good and bad news. Bad for somebody, good for somebody, as it always is. But it's good news for Ather Energy. Ather Energy is the two-wheeler bike manufacturer. If you remember, Ola Electric and Ather were two of the startup products as far as the electric two-wheeler marketplace is considered. And Ather is just around the corner in overtaking Ola as far as market share is considered. Now, this is very, very significant because if you follow Ola and Ather's journey, this is like a David and Goliath journey. Okay? Now, Ola Electric began after Ola Cabs had a very, very big run. Very big run. So, if you remember the journey, Ola Cabs began in 2008, 2010, something of that sort. When did Ola Cabs begin? Ola Cabs founding year, I guess it was 2010. So Ola Cabs began in 2010 and it started raising money like no one has ever raised money before, right? Ola raised, it has raised over $3 billion, I think. The company has blown over 15,000 crores, so about $2 billion, and it just kept raising money. Ola Cabs itself was never a sustainable business. It was never a good business. It was essentially a bubble, a scam. The entire business of Ola and Uber in India was built on the fact that let's subsidize both sides of the marketplace with VC money and grow at all costs, right? So they started giving discounts to people, they started giving incentives to drivers, and they artificially hyped up the four-wheeler cab market just because they were copying Uber in US. So Uber in US and Europe had worked as a four-wheeler, not profitably, but it had worked as a four-wheeler cab business. So these companies also started doing four-wheeler four-wheeler cab business in India without paying any attention to the per capita income, differential. So India is essentially a very poor country as far as per capita income is considered. We are at 140th rank as far as per capita income is considered, 120th, I guess, adjusted for PPT, 116th. So Indians can't afford cabs, right? So instead of retrofitting that particular model to something that works in India, like autos or bikes, they just started building cabs, and they incentivize both sides of the market. They artificially subsidize both sides of the marketplace, drivers and customers, and started hyping it up, right? And in that particular space, they ended up burning over 35,000 crore rupees, both of these companies. And then they realized that cars don't make money in India, right? Then Rapido came, it started doing bikes and autos and started doing well. Namma Yatri started doing autos and so on and so forth. So Ola Cabs was essentially an absolute scam of a business, right? A Ponzi, which was just raising money one after the other. And while Mr. Bhavish Agrawal said in 2017 or 18 that Ola Cab is very profitable. So in 2017, I was at an event and he said that Ola Cab is very profitable and we're going to IPO in 2019, right? And then they posted like multi-thousand crore losses in the next subsequent years. In 2021, he again said Ola is very profitable just before he was trying to drum up Ola Cabs for the IPO. So, and then, in 2022, they delayed their annual filings, and then they ended up showing a multi-thousand crore loss. So Ola has been that company which has always been very profitable right before it was drumming for an IPO, but not really. So Ola Cabs is essentially a Ponzi scheme, right? Has always been. The only thing that it has done is raised money successfully. But when Ola Cabs started showing cracks, as soon as the company started showing cracks, it essentially, Bhavesh Agrawal just pivoted, Mr. Bhavesh Agrawal just pivoted out of Ola Cabs and started doing Ola Electric. So he essentially uh, just started another company, raised money for it, a lot of money, at $1 billion valuation, if I remember correctly, and he just bailed out on Ola Cabs altogether. He started building Ola Electric. Right now, Ola Electric hadn't done anything. There was no reason why it should have been uh, able to raise so much money, but Ola Cabs had a lot of customer base, right? So Ola Electric, not as a subsidiary, it began as an independent company, raised money separately. It didn't even give anything to the shareholders of Ola. It just raised money out of the blue. Mr. Bhavesh Agrawal getting most of the share, and they just set up a new company, raised money for it, and started using the captive base of Ola Cabs as a means of customer acquisition. Talk about conflict of interest, right? And he just started building factories, came out with a bike and so on. Terrible products, people's asses burnt. The folks came out. Uh, Bikes were going in reverse gear without saying so. So it was just, in contrast, Ather began at as a very, very genuine, brick by brick kind of a company. Very, very brick by brick kind of a company. The only money they got was an IIT Madras incubation. They struggled there. They ran across the markets. They understood how to negotiate with people. They literally did the weldings. They all the machine work they did themselves. They made a product prototype after years of hard work. Years of hard work. Then after the prototype got made, then Mr. Binny Bansal and Mr. Sachin Bansal, I guess, from Flipkart came to help Ather. And that's when they raised some money, right? And then after raising that little amount of money, they worked hard. They grew the company brick by brick. And that's when Hero came out, right? Hero Motocorp. They essentially became the largest shareholder of Ather, uh, consequently. And then Mr. Nikhil Kamath, the younger brother, Nikhil Kamath also came out. And then Ather, grew brick by brick. So when Ola Electric was like a $5 billion company, $5 or $6 billion company, Ather was barely like $750 million, right? It was never, and then it went public at like $1 billion, $1.2 billion kind of a valuation. So Ather was always the David in this game, to a Goliath of Ola, which was essentially a Ponzi. Like, I have no qualms in saying that it was essentially a Ponzi scheme, a scam. It was a house of cards. And then now at we're looking at it, we are essentially looking at Ather going to cross Ola in terms of absolute number of vehicles sold. So at this moment, Ather Energy in 2025 June, Ather had a market share of 14.4%, while Ola had 19.9%. Okay, 19.9, 14.4. Now it is 17.2 and 16.5. So maybe in the next quarter, or the next, you will see that Ather will essentially be uh, a bigger company than Ola in terms of number of vehicles sold, which will mean that Mr. Nikhil Kamath, the younger brother again, his bet on Ather will prove to be very, very, very sound as far as the investment return is considered. Because that's when Ather will be in the top three. TVS right now number one, Bajaj number two, Ather number three, and the stock will zoom. So kudos to Mr. Nikhil Kamath, and let's say Mr. Kamath, right? So no confusion there. Kudos to Mr. Kamath. Kudos to the founders of Ather, and good on them, man. More power to them. David and Goliath. This time the David will win. And I had written about this like 2 years ago. The first post I had written. So I had read Ather's story in a book called No Shortcuts, in which I learnt about whatever I told you, their story from an incubation center to struggling to literally making things by themselves, and so on and so forth. So when everybody's batteries were burning, Aethers were not, because Aether had studied the temperature different. Earlier, people had what they'd done is they just imported battery tech from, let's say, Europe. Their temperature situations are very different, right? These people knew the market. They had struggled. They had been on the ground, like literally sweating their butts out, right? So happy to see Aether uh, closing in. This is beautiful. This is a very, very inspiring lesson for all entrepreneurs, that maybe somebody proves to be a luckier person, right? At the moment, like with Ola Electric, Ola Cabs never made money, a bullshit company, an absolute Ponzi scheme, then Ola Cabs, then Crew Trim. So people might think like this guy is really lucky, but at the end, there is still hope for, uh, you know, somebody if they are lucky and if they are doing good work. So kudos to Aether. Some comments from Mr. Tarun. I think Blabla is doing okay. Blabla car is a carpooling app. It's in TripDa space. It's a carpooling app, not a manufacturer. Nothing to do with this market. I remember people comparing him with Elon in news, Mr. Musk. Uh, Bhavish Agrawal, right? Well, whatever I've said, I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Bhavish Agrawal, by the way. Hate the game, hate don't not the player, as they say, right? So the game was raise as much money as possible and as fast as possible, right? And he did that. He could somehow convince investors to back him in Ola cabs, then Ola Electric, then Krutrim, and so on. So hate the game, not the player. He did what he wanted to do, or what he could do, uh, which nobody else could do. So everybody wanted to raise money. Everybody was looking at it, but only he could do it. He was amongst the very few people who could convince so many investors to put in so much of money on him. So good on him. But essentially, whatever he's created is shit. And sooner or later, things catch up. So it's good to be ahead of the curve. So that's the good news we began the day with. Very, very good news. Very inspiring for everybody. Now we'll come to the bad news. Because, that's how life is. TCS is firing 12,000 people, guys. TCS is looking at firing 12,000 people. Now, viewers of Thinker's Frequency would know uh, who told you, first, right? And how many times did I tell you? I feel like an African lady in hindsight. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? What happened? Exactly what I told you. And when did I say that would happen? A long time ago. And so on and so forth, right? 2% pink slips, 100% shock. TCS strategy to be future ready entails mass firing 12,000 senior and mid-level staffers, a first in India. Tectonic shift, AI disruption, low demand, drive TCS restructuring moves, bench time to be reduced, billable days to increase, and more software firms to follow. So more software firms to follow. As I said, the Indian $280 billion IT services game is in trouble, is in deep trouble, and right now it's right at this path. Right, we talked about this in depth. We said that a lot of noise around Indian IT, which is basically focusing on the tariff problem right now. They are not counting everything that's gonna come, right? That's gonna come. They're not counting everything, and this is just begun, is what I've been telling you. And now the signs are clear. So this is the 64th episode. I've been saying this for 64 days now. And I am very worried about the people who are getting laid off, the 12,000 people. I am praying for them. I don't know how those families will deal with this particular debacle. This is hard, very hard, because when we look at the macro terms and when we look at the macro figures, we don't count the personal miseries, right? Every misery becomes a statistic, essentially, which is very sad, because I think it was Lenin who said, right? A boy killed is a tragedy, and 1,000 boys killed is just a statistic. So when you look at 12,000 people suddenly losing jobs, uh, you don't think about like this is one family, right? These are 12,000 families, which are when you're talking about seniors to mid-level staffers, when a person has been working in an environment for 15 years or 20 years, it becomes very difficult for that person to actually uh, pivot to another career because he's been a loyal employee, he's been doing whatever he's been doing. So I deeply worry about these people, and I just hope something good happens. A lot of parallel industries, uh, you know, uh, you know, uh, some parallel industries starts rising up. Some comments by Mr. Tiwari. The Oracle Nishant. The Oracle Nishant. Thank you so much, Mr. Tiwari, for the honor. But yeah, I mean, we can do this a lot now. We predict so much of things every day, and a lot of those predictions come true. So it's gonna be amazing, right? We're gonna be very good at predicting. Mr. Patil asks, "Hi, hi, many of these people who get laid off are from senior people in IT, and whenever I try to follow their news personally, they get jobs quickly being in IT. It's not like core industry like mechanical, etc." Mr. Patil, so when you look at adjacencies, first of all, nothing like this has happened before. So you're not seeing what you have seen in the past or whatever you've seen in the past few months or past few years. Nothing like this has happened as yet. So what you're going to see is going to be very, very different from whatever has happened before. And you're right, people try to pivot, but there's only a limit to how much you can pivot, right? TCS employs 6 lakh people. If 12,000 go out and then Infosys employs some 3.5 lakh people, let's say 6% or 12% of those people go out, then HCL employs some similar number of people, right? Then there's a saturation of people. Then it becomes difficult for people to pivot, right? And unfortunately for India doesn't have that big of a product industry, right? The 280 billion service industry that India has, IT service industry, it 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 is too huge for other people to absorb, right? So it is a real issue, which you are going to see now. We have not seen this before, is what I'm telling you. Speaking of adjacencies, some hiring is happening at GCCs, the Global Capacity Centers, uh, and mid-sized companies are hiring more. So, of course, mid-sized and small-sized GCCs will hire more than, let's say, the big-sized GCCs. Big-sized GCCs hiring rate is at 6 to 8%, and mid-size is at 12%. So mid-size companies are going to hire a lot, and GCCs, the gain of GCCs is also a loss of IT, because IT business uh, is essentially IT services business essentially does what GCCs are supposed to do. So the rise of GCCs will mean further loss of business for IT industry. So if you've been around, if you've been a viewer of Thinkers Frequency regularly, you've not had the stock of IT players, right? At least the big bellwether, and that means your money has been saved. So congratulations and all the best to all of us. Moving on, PLI scheme. PLI scheme in the smartphone industry play. Uh, Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, government, after running the scheme since 2017, so 2017 to 8 years, after running the scheme for almost 8 years, government said that we're going to pull PLI out, right, from smartphone industry. And because we'd use that money somewhere else, so we've incubated a smartphone manufacturing industry. It's become come from the ground up to like $20 billion in exports and so on and so forth. In fact, more than that, about $100 billion in exports, if I'm not wrong, something like that. But it's grown big, so we'll put that money out now. So after that announcement has been made, PLI unplugged Samsung exports losing charge. So handset shipments dropped 20% in Q1. Apple, Dixon face same cost disadvantage in FY27. So viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember this is an a developing story. With this development, when the PLI was supposed to get out, people thought that what's going to happen is the smartphone manufacturing or smartphone export industry from India gonna survive without PLI because now it's so strong, it's been making so much of money and so on and so forth. Is it a good play? Uh, Turns out that these people are saying that if this PLI thing is removed, we're gonna have a very bad cost disadvantage when it comes to Vietnam or China. So at the moment we have a cost advantage with Vietnam and China, but that cost advantage uh, might just turn into a disability because the trade deal hasn't been settled yet, right? So India is an especially difficult place to do business and to sustain business and so on and so forth. So you need special incentives to stay intact, right? If you look at the numbers, without smartphone PLI, India cost disability versus Vietnam would be at 10% and China would be at 15%. If exports of others drop too, component incentive scheme may also get affected. So they are looking at basically, they're saying that if smartphone exports don't pick up, right? So smartphone is the end product, right? Right now, what they're doing, if they have like a 20% value addition in the smartphone industry, so they're saying that if we are not being able to export smartphones because the domestic market is already in a decline, right? Domestic smartphone market is not growing at all. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember 150 million smartphones selling for 2-3 years straight. Domestic smartphone market is static and in fact it's slightly declining, right? So they're saying that if we are not being able to export, what will happen to the component manufacture scheme? Because that's where the government was looking next, right? To increase the value addition as far as the smartphone manufacturing play. That's what the government was looking at. That smartphone manufacturing said, now let's look at components. And they say, where will those components go? So right now Samsung's exports are down. If Dixon and Apple's exports also go down, what will you do with the component thing, right? Where would those components go? So a very complicated situation. The numbers are yeah, the numbers are not good. The absolute numbers are great though. The absolute numbers are awesome, but some trouble ahead. Moving on. Mid-career professionals are turning to MBA. No surprise there. Uh, Substance versus form after Supreme Court's Hayat verdict. All eyes on Tiger Global case. So this is an important case. This is a strategically and intellectually important case that we've discussed, albeit not much detail. So Hayat, the hotel group, they were running a consulting operation. It was essentially a consulting shop where they were as consultants running hotels in India, right? So they were not paying the total tax because their permanent establishment was not in India. The permanent establishment was outside and they were running the fees, the taxes they were paying on were on the consulting fees, not on the entire establishment which they were running, right? So Supreme Court essentially said that this is not wrong. This is not right. And you will have to pay taxes as a permanent establishment. So this is a debate on letter of law versus spirit of law, right? So let's say if the law states that you will have to have a permanent establishment to pay taxes, okay, and a company evades that by having its permanent address somewhere else where there is a favorable tax treaty, let's say Mauritius or somewhere, and it does the task here in India with a shell company kind of a way, with let's say a consulting assignment instead of an operator, right? So the taxes get reduced. So they are legal by letter of law, right? But they are not legal as far as the spirit of law. So, in fact, even as far as letter of law, the operation isn't real, right? The Indian operation, which is supposed to be like an operating business, their company registration is showing that this is not an operating business. The operating business resides in Mauritius or something like that. So, letter of law versus spirit of law. Legally, they've set up shell companies, they've set up everything, right? Which look good on paper, but is it actually following the law? So, substance versus form. letter of law, spirit of law. So Hayat verdict has said that this is not gonna fly, which is now looking at Tiger Global. So Tiger Global is one of the investors, the early investors and the biggest investors of Flipkart. If you know about them, that's the best way to recognize them. So they have been investing in India with shell companies based in Mauritius. It's basically nothing. It's a tax saving instrument, right? So the government is now the court is looking at whether that will fly or not. So this is, and this particular case will have cascading effects which are hard to imagine, right? Because then you will be looking at uh, you know a lot of investments. How do those investments happen? How do those foreign investors park their money in India, bet their money in India? So I was talking to an investor based out of Emirates right now, a very legendary Indian VC, and he said India is a pit. So continuously in a 1 hour conversation, he must have said that like 10 times that India is a pit. People get their money stuck in India, and it's very hard to take that money out. And you have US investors. Don't screw those investors. Register your company in US and so on and so forth. So this particular verdict, if it goes like it has gone with Hayat, it's gonna be bad for the VC ecosystem, but good for legality of it, and it'll make the system more fair. But that's always not a good news. Moving on. Today we are moving fast, right? Because I got a bit late. Have a meeting, very important meeting. Uh, a lot of political chit chat. Speaking of geopolitics and trade, which is directly relevant to us, uh, you remember we talked about US and Japan deal, where Mr. Trump had announced that Japan's gonna have like a $550 billion in investment in US, and it's a great deal, and they've sorted it out, one of the biggest deals, and so on and so forth. He said, turns out that that's not clear. Japan has come out saying that this is not the deal that we signed. A lot of things are very nuanced. The profits of those deals. Mr. Trump had said that that investment will come to US and 90% of profits will be with US. And they say, no, 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 that's not cool. It's going to be a shared investment, and the profits will be in, proportion to the investment sum. So Japan and US, the perspective that, or let's say the news cycle management that Mr. Trump said, has proven to be a bit of a premature hooray, right? So Japan is saying, not cool, this is no cool. And with this, India has gotten scared. And people are gotten scared. So people are like, what the hell is happening here, right? If they announced a trade deal and it turns out that trade deal wasn't signed like that, and it's essentially not that good of a deal, you've got to be having everything on paper, right? So what we were hoping for, that India and US will essentially sign the deal before 1st August, it's not gonna happen. Everything has gotten a new perspective. Mr. Piyush Goyal says, deadline se hamari deals nahi hoti. We're gonna sign a deal. We're gonna have a premature agreement before August 1 if it happens. If doesn't happen, it's gonna take some time. It's gonna be done by October, November. That's what he said. So a lot of shakeups there. People are cautioning Indian government to be very careful with the deal as far as US is considered, because Mr. Trump is especially tough, extremely tougher than anybody has ever been in US. So it's just a lot of. Speaking of trade deals, US and China's trade deal is also getting a bit. It's gonna get a 3-month extension, 30-day extension. So trade deals are getting extended day by day. Speaking of trade deals, India and China are yet not done. Indonesia deal has been done, but not as expected. US and Europe, EU essentially, they seem to be looking at sorting their deal out. So they seem to be looking at a good news, right? They say, Mr. Trump says that this deal is the biggest deal that we've ever signed, and it seems that EU's chief, Miss Von Mercel, something, her name I don't remember. She's agreeing with that. So maybe US and Europe essentially have signed it up, but India UK kind of a deal should not be expected anytime soon with US. Moving on, a very very big news. This is very surprising to everybody. Should be surprising to everybody that JSW is entering the car market, and it's gonna be away. Right now, JSW is essentially a distributor of MG Motors, which is a Chinese company, SIAC, right? Shanghai Auto Corporation or something. So JSW is now going to invest about $2 to $3 billion. That is roughly 16,000 crores to 24,000 crores, 25,000 crores in becoming a car company. So it's basically India will have a new car company. Can you imagine that? India's car market is not growing. In fact, India's car market is deeply stressed, and it's a big problem. You know, it's huge. Everything is very very screwed as far as the Indian car market is considered. As we've discussed, as viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, we've talked a lot about how Indian car market is not able to have any entry level car sales, right? All 66% of Indian cars are right now SUVs that are getting sold, which is essentially pointing to a very big affordability issue as far as the bottom of the pyramid is considered. And without a good sales, momentum in the bottom of the pyramid, the industry can't function, right? So you're essentially looking at a very strained car market, but in that strained car market, you're looking at JSW entering in. What does this say, folks? What does this say? So it's not gonna be a collaboration like it was with MG Hector. They're gonna be a new brand, you know, and they're tying up with German, Italian, car makers in Europe to help them design cars and so on and so forth. They're gonna come out with electric vehicles cars, and they say that we have steel. We're gonna learn the welding technology from Korea. We're gonna learn battery propulsion from China. We're gonna learn precision from Germany, design from Italy, and we're gonna make the market rise. And I'm like, whoa, holy shit, to a new journey. JSW Motors, newly appointed, this guy. Germany precision, Italy, South Korea advanced welding tech, China electric. So I've covered everything. JSW might be entering only 50 lakh and above. No, that's not true actually. That's not true. They're not looking at the premium segment only. Mr. Tarun. So a few comments. Mr. Tarun says not only affordability but also congestion, as locals roads aren't that good. Roads are getting improved. Roads will get improved. So that is not a permanent problem. And Mr. Elliot D'Souza says on LinkedIn, US-EU deal done as of this morning, 15% tariffs on EU goods across the board. Yeah, that's what we read. Not done, but moving towards final completion. Not done yet. Moving on. Some details to be ironed out, right? Very, very interesting. JSW. The empire has really grown despite, let's say, an adversarial government, right? So JSW's leadership, the Jindals, have been very pro-Congress all their lives, right? And they even had a very big fight with Z Group. If you remember, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember how we discussed JSW and EU having a big fight, right? You remember that incident? The funniest of all incidences, where JSW went in a room with Z, and they said that, hey, we're gonna pay you for favorable coverage. Z said yes. They caught that and they said, we did a sting on Z. And Z said, we were doing a sting on J. After getting caught, they said, we were doing a sting on JSW, and they just did a counter sting. So very, very interesting episodes. But this government has not, troubled JSW, it seems, or JSW has basically navigated tough political waters, which is saying something, which is huge. All kudos to JSW guys, right? Moving on. Big budget clash with South films to test Bollywood metal. A lot of South Indian movies and Bollywood movies, Hindi movies are gonna clash, and that is gonna be a very bad news for the Indian film industry, because theater market is essentially a very, very tough market, right? Theaters are literally going down, and theater business is falling from the cliff. It's very difficult with the changing times, especially with the OTT deal. Movies coming on OTT and reduced window for theatrical movies. So earlier, they used to have like a 6 month window, 9 month window for distribution of a movie to digital means. But then came OTT, and that window has come down to even 30 days or 15 days in some cases. So essentially, theater revenues have gone down. And a very big problem for theater revenues is the pipeline of movies. Let's say if you have a South Indian movie and a Bollywood movie releasing at same time, and they have like a 150 200 crore budget or a 400 crore budget, both of them, the screens are limited, right? The screens are limited. So what happens is it's a lot of cannibalization which happens. It's never good for the industry to have clashes, especially in tough times. So the pipeline should be like staggered, because that will be good for business. Movies won't eat each other's pie, and the cinema industry can flourish. But that's not what's happening right now. A lot of clash of the titans, says the report. It says essentially uh, a lot of Kantara chapter 1, Sunny Sanskari ki Tulsi Kumari, and Ikkes, and so on and so forth. Raja Sahib Prabhas, October, August, Kuli, and so on. War 2, a lot of Hindi movies and South Indian movies are going to clash, which is obviously going to be very, very bad for the industry overall. Speaking of the film industry, Mr. Amir Khan has done something which I consider a stroke of genius. I think it's a stroke of genius. You can share your thoughts on what happens there, right? I think it's just incredible what he's done. So what he's done is that he's given a big finger to the OTTs and gone with Sitare Zameen Par as a pay-per-view on YouTube, right? So $99 and you'll be able to watch Sitare Zameen Par, and no free streaming, no subscription video on demand, SVOD it's called, when movies are available on subscription, right? So he says no to that, and he's saying $99 for Sitare Zameen Par video on demand YouTube. Let's see how many it can sell. Right now, this I think is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Now, this is the way to go. Mr. Khan and Mr. Bijli, the chairman of PVR, they had an interview recently, very good interview. Mr. Khan said that I don't understand the business model of films anymore. Why would anybody go to buy a ticket if they know that something is going to be free just 30 days later on their OTT, right? That's essentially stupid. And I agree. I have been writing that for a very long time. I have said we need to preserve theaters, we need to preserve films. This is very important. This is not a joke. If we end up killing the film industry and the theater industry, we're going to hurt the bottom of the pyramid yet again. Because hospitality industry, entertainment industry hires a lot of people, and these are mostly not very well paying. It's very difficult for these people if they go out of business, right? So you got to preserve these industries, and a way to preserve these industries is saying fu to the streaming play. Because if you just put your movie on streaming 30 days after it's released on theaters, there's no way your movie is going to sell on theaters, right? And then if your movie doesn't sell on theaters, OTT guys won't pay. OTT guys won't be able to pay you the amount of money which you would have otherwise earned in theaters. So it's essentially you are just killing your own business, right? Initially, these OTT platforms, Netflix and the likes, they used to pay a lot of money for these people's rights, but now they've cut down on their budgets. And if you end up killing the theaters because of these guys, all the leverage tomorrow will be with these guys. What happens to you then? You'll basically be dependent on these guys for everything. Where do you go then? You won't have anywhere to go, right? You can't start another OTT platform, network effects, right? So Mr. Khan has essentially put his money out on YouTube for $99, and people are saying it's a very valid experiment. People are not bullish on it. I'm very bullish on it. I think every player in this industry should do that. As Mr. Bijli suggested, the right way for films monetization is release it on theaters, have a 3 month period, right? At least 3 month period or 6 month period, then release it on pay-per-view. Let's say on YouTube you have a pay-per-view, $100 or something. Then after 3 months of that or 6 months of that, then release it as a free, subscription video on demand kind of a play. That makes total sense. And that's how this industry should be working. So let's see what happens with Mr. Amir Khan's experiment, right? Moving on. How is that, by the way? What do you think of that? Uh, Nestle's, chief executive is going out. He's getting replaced after a 10-year job. He has given a very, very wasteful, boring interview. No insights at all. I wasted my time on that interview, so that you don't have to. So don't read it. If you somehow stumble upon it, just avoid it. A bullshit interview. No insights. It's gonna be tough, he says. It's gonna be tough. We have a lot to learn from small players. uh, Things are very different now. This is the kind of stuff he essentially said. Moving on. How are you liking the fast pace today? You know, I am pretty fast right now, right? I have to be because it's 8:51 already. Reliance Infra, Reliance Power say ED searches have been over, no impact on business, everything is cool. So we talked about this, Reliance getting some sort of, ED raids for the transactions with Yes Bank primarily. We talked a lot about this, how Mr. Anil Ambani's dealings with Yes Bank came under scanner. There were a lot of kickbacks. There were a lot of those things in consideration. So those things are still an overhang on Mr. Anil Ambani's group. However, nothing serious, as they claim. Of course, they'll claim that, right? Multiples led consortium seeks CCI approval for 32% stake in VIP Industries. So VIP Industries, led by Mr. Piramal, is looking at selling itself. The family is going out, they're selling 32%, and then it's going to be an open market thing. So VIP is going to be out. It's not going to be a family run enterprise anymore. And there was a very interesting interview of the founder of VIP. He said, we have to sell because the next generation of the family is not interested in taking the business further, right? And this is yet again a very, very uh, you know good recall to an insight we shared at viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember. What is the best thing that can happen to your business? What is the best thing that can happen to your business? Do you remember that, viewers of Thinkers Frequency? I said, what is the best thing that can happen to one's business and one's business story? Just think about it. Write it in comments till I have to charge my laptop. Do you remember that? The best thing that can happen to your business is essentially your competitor imploding, right? So VIP has been a legendary company. It's one of the very big wealth makers for Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. It was his early bet, and then VIP grew like nothing before. The company essentially tapped on a very, very nice business opportunity with rising travel. It was supposed to get a lot of traffic, and it figured out that these bags are going to be very valuable. It went up, but then due to whatever management constraints, or as the patriarch of the business family said, the next generation not being interested, Mokobara and the likes, these bag manufacturing startups funded by VC players, they propped up. And when they are propping up, they're seeing the big incumbent, the biggest player in the biggest fish in the pond, essentially fading out. So the best thing that can happen to your business or any business is that your, competitor just implodes. And we've discussed, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, we've discussed a lot of these cases where competition just imploded, and companies succeeded basis that, right? We've talked a lot about this, I'm sure you remember. Moving on, speaking of growing travel, Indigo is planning more international flights And it's also looking at MRO opportunities. MRO is essentially maintenance operations. So they are looking at, maintenance, repair, and overhaul operations. So Indigo has essentially right now some 65% of market share. uh, I'll just tell you exact. Yeah, 64.5% of market share in India. It's going to run a lot of international flights. Right now, the contribution of international flights is 28%, and it's going to aim for a 40% contribution of international flights in its growth journey by FY 2030. So Indigo is essentially looking at, they've bought some bigger aircrafts, A3, what are the Airbuses they bought? A321 XLRs set to join the fleet, and then they've also bought something from Norway, uh, you know, uh, which is going to help them do bigger flights, because right now, yeah, Boeing 787 Dreamliners leased from Norway's North Atlantic. So big flights, big planes, they're gonna be big on the international carrier journey. Moving on, US EU agree on 50% tariff deal to prevent uh, you know, uh, settle the trade. She's meeting Miss von der Leyen. That was the name. A meeting to finalize the trade agreement. It's gonna be settled 15%, and a 90-day extension, 3-month extension for China, and even India will be looking at something like that if something doesn't happen right before August 1, right? Of course, and it won't happen. So moving on, we've discussed a lot of things very quickly. Uh, Amid FDI slump, focus turns on chemical, leather, and electronics. So, DPIIT working with states to woo foreign investors, cabinet note on this final lap. So, they are essentially looking at leather because, can you guess why they're looking at leather and chemicals and electronics? Because of what happened with the tariff deal with UK, right? So a lot of FDI will pour on these industries, which will have a very, very, this is the second order effect, right? You get a tariff deal, now suddenly your 99% of your goods are gonna go duty free to UK. So you see the industries which have been dormant or which have not been able to get a lot of investments, they will suddenly rise. So that's exactly what's happening. Speaking of what's happening, uh, the rare earth mineral play is getting a serious push from the government. So they have asked one of the biggest, Indian PSUs in this regard to start looking at it aggressively. So viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, we've talked a lot about how rare earth magnet supply block from China essentially hurt the Indian players a lot, and it's continuing to hurt. Mr. Rajiv Bajaj came out with an interview a few days ago where he said that our, August production will get halted, and that's going to happen. So it's a pretty tough deal, but it looks like India is essentially looking at solving that on an aggressive basis. NLC India looks to source rare earth from abroad. You know, NTPC Green plans renewable energy battery energy storage in Bihar. So Bihar getting some investments, and so on and so forth. Moving on. Index is good. Not all stocks going up down. Of course, we've talked a lot about this. How to look at the market right now. Okay. Yeah, I hope I'm not missing out anything. Bank of Baroda and Canara let go of 54,000 crores loan for margin safety. Payment banks see 10% reduction in SLR. SLR is essentially statutory liquidity ratio. So not to lend. Statutory liquidity ratio is basically a nod by the government that you can lend more. It basically gives these payment banks some sort of lending leeway. Lower SLR would enable them to invest in high yielding assets. Also want a rise in deposit cap to 5 lakhs. So payment banks looking at a 5 lakh. Right now the cap is, I guess, 2 lakh. So they'll be looking at some sort of Good news there. Moving on. This is good news for Airtel, right? Cheaper cancer care therapy earns big bucks for pharma. Speaking of pharma, US pharma is essentially blocking a lot of counterfeit products, a lot of cheap copies of the very, very expensive and hot drugs of weight loss and obesity, the Wegovys, the semaglutides, and so on and so forth. So, the GLP drugs, as they are called. So, they are having a parallel market in US, it seems, and the US government is trying to stop that. Pharma companies are thankful because, of course, it's going to be a very, very big play for pharma companies for times to come, right? So speaking of pharma, cancer care therapy earns Immunoact logs revenue of 62 crores and profit before 112 crores. So some cancer care drug company called Immunoact is looking good. Good for them. Good for them. US pharma lobbies like nobody else, says Mr. Tarun. So US pharma essentially, they are at serious crosshairs with RFK Jr., who is essentially a very, very, smart person. I have a lot of respect. A very, very good book that I recommend everybody is The Real Anthony Fauci. This book blows everybody's mind. It's just extraordinary, that book. So US pharma was essentially banned from advertising on television, on networks, right? These people essentially banned them. And then they said that if you ban US pharma to advertise on these channels, on these TV channels, what are you going to do? You might just be able to stop, let's say, bad marketing of pharma products in US, but what will you end up doing? What will be the second order effect of that? It's going to be that you're going to kill the media industry, because media industry essentially has its doors closing on it, and if this particular thing passes, the media industry will just die, right? And to avoid that, they reverse that ban. So a lot of pharma play. Speaking of Mr. RFK Jr., Coca-Cola has essentially agreed to use cane sugar to make Coca-Cola, instead of the other kind. And a lot of companies have moved away from artificial dyes, the colors on food products. So a lot of action happening with the big ag, the big pharma in US, and the cascading effects of that come to India. So always very interesting. Always very interesting. Boeing essentially, speaking of interesting, a lot of trade wars, are benefiting Boeing because of Mr. Trump's hard trade strategies with countries. Boeing is one of the let's say beneficiaries of those deals, as is being displayed. Uh, Aviation analysts are looking at it. So basically, Mr. Trump is directly lobbying on behalf of Boeing. He's saying that Boeing planes need to be a part of the deal. We need to see them through. And what does this remind you of? Do you remember what I told you about, business outcomes mostly a result of political will? Did I not talk about that? I told you about that, right? Like businesses talk as if they control their destiny. But essentially, all business outcomes are the result of political will, and this proves that. Right now, Boeing is dealing with so much of shit, it would have been in a very bad position. But they have a political establishment which wants them to live, which wants them. Because if Boeing falls, a lot of bad things happen in the country, right? In US. So the politicians want to save them, and so they get sailed through. So once again, all business outcomes are mostly the result of political will. Uh, Speaking of business decisions, Meta is escalating the AI talent war with OpenAI. It has hired the co-creator of ChatGPT as the chief scientist, who's going to directly work with Mark Zuckerberg and Alex, the chief at Alex. Alex is AI, chief AI officer Alexander Wang, right? So it's going to happen. Why do you think Meta is so hell bent on the AI revolution? Now, we've talked about this, but I just want to revise that. Do you remember why Meta is going balls to the wall as far as the whole AI play is considered? You remember that, right? We remember that. Can you remember that? Because as more and more people start talking to AI, it's bad news for social networking. Now, the era of social networking has finally seen, is finally seeing a worthy competitor, right? Mr. Tarun, you're right. As of now, since Facebook's birth in 2004, there was nothing competing with the idea of social networking. Let's forget about the products. Forget about how good or bad social media products are. There was no competition to social media, the concept of social media, right? But the concept of social media is now seeing competition for the first time with chatbots taking its place. Like I told you about my friend building Era, right? In India. It's like a friend in India. So it's a chatbot and people are talking to it for like 16 hours a day, 2 hours a day. Some people have declared Era their girlfriend, right? What happens to social media apps if that becomes the norm? If more and more people driven with basically driven to isolate themselves start talking to bots, it's very very bad news for social media companies. And with social media companies, you're essentially looking at Facebook, right? Facebook is the king of social media with ByteDance as the next big thing, but there goes social networking. So with AI, with chatbots becoming a thing, two of the most two of the strongest people, like Google and Facebook, two of the strongest companies of all time, in my perspective. There's nothing stronger than Google, never has been, and Facebook would be a close second. They are seeing themselves get dethroned like never before. So that's happening, and you know, with that, a lot of political thing is happening because social media apps were also accused, rightfully so, of political bias, a lot of left wing bias. So now chatbots are being accused of left wing bias because the coders were the same, right? So that's happening, and yeah, that's happening. Lenskart is finally going ahead with this 1 billion IPO at a $10 billion valuation. I am very sad about this. I am very sad about this because people are going to lose a lot of money on Lenskart. Whoever puts money on Lenskart at a $10 billion valuation will essentially see their money get halved in some time. In 6 months, 8 months, they'll look at that money getting halved. And these people know that these people are overselling. They would have been fine with a $3 billion valuation or like $5 billion valuation because Lenskart as of now has raised like 1.8 billion. So a $5 billion valuation would have been a good return for the company. But scum is scum, and they are trying to steal money with this $10 billion valuation because they think the market is hot and it's going to take it. But whoever gets into this will lose a lot of money, and I'll personally look at ways of shorting the stock. So screw these guys. And with that, we come to the end of the 64th episode, guys. How was it? How was it? Whenever I look at streams, whenever I look at these streams and what happens, I'm always reminded of that Auntie G, right? The one who had great impact on me. You remember that? They're riding the wave of 2 lakh crore IPO that's going to happen. Yeah, so all you need is just one bad news and the entire market suddenly turns bad, right? Just one bad news somewhere. Somebody goes default, somebody's stock happens here, something happens in US, some debt default happened somewhere, somebody's not being able to pay. And just one thing, and the market sentiment turns negative. And as soon as that happens, and that invariably happens, it's just gonna happen with them. And these people, they could have been doing a $6 billion IPO and it wouldn't have been a problem, right? They would have taken retailers in part, but they're looking at a 13x revenue multiple when a company 10 times their size, growing twice as fast, thrice as fast, essentially, is at a 5x revenue multiple. So these guys are literal scam artists. I have no respect for them. and they'll take down a lot of retail investors with them. And let's see if that prediction comes true. And Mr. Tarun, you're right. I hate to say it, but I agree with Auntie Ji. Something needs to happen. We need to grow here. And this was a lot of fun, guys. A lot of fun. Mr. Patil, Mr. Tarun, Mr. Tiwari, on LinkedIn, Mr. Kulkarni, Miss Vashini Narayanan, Mr. Elliot D'Souza. Lovely time talking. Brings us to the end of the 64th episode, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. We're gonna punch in. It's 9:10 already. I wish you a beautiful day, personally and professionally. And I'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time. Hopefully. Bye-bye.